All right, so in this lesson, we are going to look at slope, what slope is, and learn how to calculate it in two different ways. Okay, so first of all, what is slope? So slope is defined as the steepness of a straight line, and slope is commonly referred to as m. So when we calculate slope, we are going to write m equals. And you'll understand that more when we start to talk about what slope-intercept form is, but if you can just accept for now that the variable m stands for slope, we'll be in good shape, okay? Here's a couple pictures of slope, and we're going to talk about what these mean. Now, the black lines are just your x and y axis, and then your green lines are just examples of different type of slope, and we're going to look at each one of those now. All right, so first of all, there's 4 different types of slope. So the first type of slope is positive. If you're focusing, and these are 2 different graphs of positive slope here. So I have this little car here as a representation of positive slope. This line is going upward, okay? So it's trailing upward, and you can kind of see with the representation of the car is driving upward, okay? So the line is going from the bottom left all the way to the top right of the graph. Then we have negative slope. So with a negative slope, it's going from the top left all the way down to the bottom right. And you can see that the car has a downward motion. Now with both of these, I have a graph without a car below so that you can see what it would look like in a real situation. Okay, now positive and negative slope are 2 of the most common types of slope that you're going to encounter. But there's 2 other types of slope that we're going to talk about. There's zero slope and undefined. So zero slope is going to be a horizontal line, and you can picture it as if like a car is just driving absolutely straight, okay? So it's going to be a straight horizontal line, and it can be down here, it can be up here, but it's a straight horizontal line. And then you have something called undefined slope. And if you think about a car, it's like the car literally cannot drive on a vertical line. And so that would be undefined, meaning impossible, okay? And so you can have a vertical line over here, you can have a vertical line over here, but the point is that it is a vertical line. So you have positive, negative, zero, and undefined. Okay, so there are 2 methods to calculating slope, and we're going to go over both of them in this lesson. The first method to calculating slope is to use the slope formula using 2 coordinates. Now, I'm going to give you both of those coordinates. So you'll have your first coordinate, and then you'll have your second coordinate. Now, the formula is m equals, which means slope equals, because I remember I just told you that slope is commonly referred to as m, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, you may be thinking, what's y2 and y1, x2 and x1? And that's where your coordinates come into play. So your first coordinate is going to be x and y, and your second coordinate is also x and y. Well, your first x is x1, your second x is x2. Your first y is y1, and your second y is y2. Okay? Now, method 2 is to count the rise over the run on a graph. And we're going to get more specific about that when we get to that part of the lesson. But essentially, you're going to find any 2 points on the graph where they intersect perfectly on actual points. So for example, right here and right here. And you're going to count the rise, and then you're going to count the run, and you're going to divide them, okay? And like I said, we'll talk more about that when we get to that point. So let's take a look at method 1 here, and I've included the formula at the top right-hand side, okay? So we have 2 coordinates, 4, 3, and -2, -1, and here's our formula. So I always like to start off by writing our formula. Okay, now our first coordinate is our y2, and I'm going to go ahead and label these. So this is my x1, This is my x2. This is my y1, and this is my y2. Okay, so I'm going to take my y2, which is -1, minus, because that's the operation, okay, and you can even cross it out when you're done, y1, which is 3, over x2, which is -2, minus, because that's the operation, x1, which is 4. Okay, so -1 minus 3 is -4, and -2 minus 4 is -6. Now, -4 over -6 can be simplified because, first of all, a negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive. And then 4 over 6 simplified into a fraction is 2 over 3. So the slope of this line is going to be 2 over 3. And actually, the way that we should really write this is going to be m equals 2 over 3. All right, let's take a look at another one. So we'll start off by writing our formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And by the way, this is a formula that you will have to memorize, and the best way to memorize it is to write it at the beginning of every problem. So I'm going to label my x1 and my x2, my y1 and my y2. So I start with my y2, which is -2, minus, because that's my operation, y1, which is 4, over x2, which is 2, minus -1. So here's where you need to be careful because you have several negatives here. So let's simplify the top first. -2 minus 4, that's going to be -6. Now, 2 minus -1. Think in your head, you have a subtraction problem, right? So you have keep, change, change. So that's going to be 2 plus 1, which is 3. Okay? Now, -6 over 3. We need to go ahead and simplify it. Well, a negative divided by a positive is a negative, and 6 over 3 is 2. So m equals -2. So the slope of that line is -2. All right, let's take a look at another one here. So we'll start by writing our formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to label my points. This is my x1, this is my x2, this is my y1, this is my y2. All right, so y2, which is 4, minus, because that's my operation, y1, which is -3, over x2, which is 5, minus, because that's the operation, x1, which is 0. Okay, so here again we have this negative, or this minus and this negative. So remember, keep, change, change. 4, and then change that to positive, and change this to +3. So that's going to be 7 over 5. So m equals 7 over 5. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, should I change that into a mixed number, 1 2/5? So for linear equations, you want to keep everything as an improper fraction. You will see why once we get to slope-intercept form, which is a couple lessons later, but you do not want to change this into a mixed number. So for now, you want to leave everything as an improper fraction, okay? All right, let's try another one. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So here's our x1, our x2, our y1, and our y2. All right, so we're going to take our y2, which is 8, minus our y1, which is -1, over our x2, which is 2, minus our x1, which is 2. So we have keep, change, change. So keep 8, change minus to plus, change -1 to +1. So that's going to be 9 over, and then 2 minus 2 is 0. Now, if you take 9, and remember, fraction bar is a division bar, divided by 0, and let me see if I can actually bring a calculator up here on the screen. Let's see if I can do this. So 9 divided by 0 equals. It's going to come up with cannot divide by 0. That's because this is going to tell you when your 0 is on the bottom, this is going to tell you that this is an undefined slope. So m equals undefined, which means if your slope is undefined, it must be a vertical line. Okay? So your slope here is undefined because you cannot divide by 0. All right, let's take a look at this one here. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we have our x1, we have our x2, we have our y1, and we have our y2. So let's go ahead and put it together. So our y2 is 1 minus our y1 is 1 over our x2 is 4 minus, and our x1 is -6. So 1 minus 1 is 0 over, here we have keep, change, change. Keep 4, change minus to plus, change -6 to +6. So that's going to be 10. Now I'm going to bring up the calculator here again so that, so that you can see this. So here this time our 0 is on top. So you have 0 divided by 10, and that's going to be 0. Okay, so here our m is 0. Our slope is simply 0, which means we will have a horizontal line. Now, where that horizontal line is, I haven't taught you that yet, but you'll know that if your slope is 0, you have a horizontal line. Okay? All right, let's try this one here. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this is our x1, this is our x2, this is our y1, this is our y2. All right, so our y2 here is 9 minus, and then our y1 is 3 over, our x2 is 5 minus, and our x1 is 2. So 9 minus 3 is 6, 5 minus 2 is 3. Positive divided by positive is a positive, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So our m equals 2, which means our slope of our line is positive 2. And if it's positive, remember that it's going to go like this. Okay? Now, let's take a look at method number 2. So method number 2 is called rise over run, and the word over is referring to the fraction bar right here, okay? So with rise over run, the first thing that you're going to need to identify, well, there's two things you're going to need to identify. First of all, you need to remember that on a coordinate plane, and I'm going to draw one right here, you need to remember where your positives and negatives are, okay? So down here is negative, over here is positive, over here is negative, and over here is positive, and that's very important, okay? Now, the second thing that you're always going to have to identify is you have to find 2 points that hit the middle of the grid lines perfectly. So in this first example, I've found those points for you, but I'm not always going to do that. So for example, this does not hit the middle of the line perfectly. Neither does this, but this one does, and so does this one, okay? So what you could do from this, just to show you how this would also work with method 1, is you could take this coordinate and you could write them out and use the slope formula. But there's also a quicker way. So what you do is you start at one point, okay, and you're going to first, number 1 is you're going to first rise all the way up till you reach the second point. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I went up, so that's going to be positive 4, okay? Now I'm going to do step 2, which is to run. Now in this case, I'm running to the right, which is also positive. So 1, 2, 3. So that's positive 3, okay? So all we do now is take these numbers and put them in this formula. So rise over run, our rise was 4 and our run was 3. And that's our answer. And well, we should write m equals 4 over 3. And that's it. And remember, I told you to go ahead and leave that as an improper fraction for now. Let's look at another example here. Okay, so here I have 1 point. Here I have another point. Now, there's actually some other points in between that I could look at where it hits perfectly on the coordinate, and I could use any one of those points, but for purposes of this lesson, I'm just going to go ahead and use those 2 points, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rise, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that was plus 9. Now the second part is I'm going to run. Now I'm running to the left, which means negative. Okay, so remember my coordinate plane here. This is negative, this is positive. Okay, up here is positive, and down here is negative. So now I'm going left. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so that's negative 9. So my formula is rise over run. And that's my rise was 9. My run was negative 9. Positive divided by a negative is a negative. 9 over 9 is 1. So my slope is negative 1. All right, next one. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rise, okay? So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. And remember, I just rise enough to meet that next point. So I went up 3. Now I'm going to run, but I'm not running to the right, I'm running to the left, which means negative. And if you need to draw this little chart for yourself every single time you do it, then you need to go ahead and do that, so that you remember your signs properly. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's negative 4. So rise over run. My rise was 3. My run was negative 4. So my slope is negative 3 over 4. All right, next one. Now, here I have a horizontal line, and I don't even have to calculate anything. I know that that slope equals 0. There's no rise, okay? So because there's no rising, that's going to be 0 over, and it runs an infinite number of times. okay? So it's 0 over however long it's going to run for. But 0 divided by anything is going to be 0. So my slope is 0. All right, let's take a look at this one. So here I don't have any lines identified for me. So, or any, not lines, any coordinates identified for me. So I'm going to have to find my own here. So I'm going to go with this one right here. And that one's not on a perfect grid. Nope, nope, nope. But this one is right here. Okay, so I'm going to do this a different way so that I can show you what it means to rise in the opposite direction, okay? So I'm going to start from this second point here, and I'm going to rise. Now, you don't always rise upward. Sometimes you have to rise down. So this time, and I could just rise up from here and then run this way. But this time I'm going to rise down, which is going to mean -1. Okay, and then I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I went to the left, which means negative, so -5. So if I have rise over run, I did -1 for rise, -5 for run. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. So my slope is 1 over 5. Which is the same thing you would have gotten if you went here, which is 1, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, now here I have a vertical line, which automatically in your head should come up as undefined. So your slope M is undefined. And the reason why is because while there's a lot of rise to it, there's no run. And so if we were to look at rise over run, you can rise however many times, but your run is always going to be 0. And when you divide by 0, you're going to get undefined. All right, that is the end of this lesson, and we will do a lot more practice in class.